Hello, everybody. Welcome to Latter-day Struggles. This is your host, Valerie, and today I am delighted to have a guest with me. I'd like to introduce you all to Jody England Hansen today. Hi, Jody. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you. Thank you for having me on, Valerie.
Well, I am, like I said, I'm delighted to have you here. I am a big fan of, well, I've become a big fan of you. We've had a few conversations, and you are one smart woman. I love talking to smart people where I just, excuse me, I take in your words and I listen, and I'm pressured to think differently and really go deeper into my own ways of metabolizing how I've already thought of things before. And I think, wow, that's interesting. That's fun. I've never thought of it that way. And that has been my experience with you today, Jody, or not just today, but beforehand in our previous conversations. So I'm really grateful to have you and to call you a friend.
Thank you. I appreciate that too. It's really been an enjoyable and introspective experience to speak with you. So I'm very happy to be here, and I appreciate it.
Good. Well, first and foremost, let me offer to you guys my background on how Jody and I came together. First of all, I have known of and been a little bit acquainted with the work of her father, Eugene England, who I kind of sort of see as one of the patron saints of progressive Mormonism. I think he is a remarkable man. And coincidentally, I was reading his biography over this summer and invited myself to his wife's home, to Jody's mother's home, because I was in town and I was reading and I thought, well, who knows? Maybe she'd like a visitor. And she took me in and we spent an afternoon visiting, and I walked away with an arm full of Dr. England's books. And so it was a lovely experience. And then one thing led to another, and here we are. I'm talking to Jody. So anyhow, any thoughts on that, Jody? My experience with your mom?
Yeah, I am not going to reaffirm that because I don't want everyone showing up at her doorstep, but you were good.
Yes, yeah, that's true. That's true.
She's kind of an angel on earth. So
yes.
Yeah.
I was tickled to even be in the living room, because having read his biography, I knew that a lot of special things happened in that room, in the little soirees that they had in during his and your mother's career and time together. And actually, you spoke a lot to me in our preparation about how significant and influential some of those events were as you were around and a part of that larger picture, where they invited in a community of people that were deeply engaged in personal growth and inquiry and in community growth and development around their Christian beliefs. And it's just I just thought about, as I was reading the book and thinking about what it would have been like to be a part of that community. And of course, you were a part of it from a very special perspective. Let's go ahead and open up from our conversation. We're going to talk about the hero's journey in general. But before we even do that, Jody, talk to us a little bit about, why is your father, Eugene, how do you prefer him? Gene, Eugene, I kind of hear both.
He went by Gene England. Yeah.
Gene,
you know, of course, it's always Eugene on the writings in the books, but people knew him as Gene England. Yeah.
Okay, so let's just spend a little bit of time. Why is he so well remembered in our little community of believers?
That would be about a 30-day podcast.
Okay.
I think as his daughter and over the years and really from a very, very early age, there was not this time of where I was not aware of discussions and inquiries going on that were not about, well, let's talk so that we can all feel good about how we about what we already know or what we've already decided. Yeah. It was always an inquiry, and it was always what's next and where does this lead us? And in my experience, no matter where we lived, because we did live in a number of places, there were always gatherings. In fact, my earliest memory, and I've figured out I was probably around 3, it was when I woke up in I'm assuming it was a crib, and I could hear a gathering going on. People were talking in the other room, but I described this in other writings. But everywhere we lived, there were gatherings, there was discussion. People would come by, and I was raised in the church culture that encouraged that. And so when Dad was at Stanford and Berkeley, so I think the fact that my parents always had a space for inquiry and discussion and questions and exploration, and I learned to link that directly to what my Mormon experience, to what the Restoration Gospel was really about. That we were here to grow and learn and be there with each other as we wrestle with the questions. And it was clear from an early age also that questions did not have to be easy, and that they did not have to have an answer. And that the important thing is that we were a place for them, and acknowledging them and bringing them up, and maybe saying, well, here's what I see, or, and so there was not any kind of ingrained thing that not only did you have to have an answer, but you had to have the answer. It was more like, let's wrestle with this.
This is beautiful. You're describing to me something sacred. The
Yes.
nature of your theology from your childhood was that of openness, of curiosity, of inquiry, and of dialogue. And that was what cultivated your faith and your confidence to have a complex religious experience or faith experience. So that imagining here, if this is how you were raised, as that this is normal, this is what we do, this is how, like, the wrestle is sacred. When new things emerged or new questions arose or things that didn't feel right or didn't have quite like the clean, crisp answers that emerged, whether it be in culture or church or elsewhere, you already had the ability, the cognitive ability to sit in that kind of discomfort because it was normal to you.
Yes. And I do want to emphasize, it's not so much I have an ability that was done, it was taken care of, and it was easy. Being able to do that is still, like I said, and I'll say this a lot, a wrestle, because inevitably in life, in questioning and in behavior and in exploration, things happen that are deeply painful. Yeah. Phrases that come up a lot in the discussions I have with people when they come, and all my life, but now the phrase that is really seems appropriate to me is woundedness. We are constantly in a place of being feeling wounded, feeling hurt, feeling pain, and frequently it has to do with either how we're experiencing what someone else has done, or sitting with the impact of what we ourselves have done. And so I just don't want to give the idea that, oh, this is how it was, and so it's just pretty straightforward and easy. So right. It's not so much a done deal ability, it's like a practice.
I love that. And I think what I'm also picking up on in what you're describing too is that what I guess I'm trying to communicate right along with you is that while it isn't easy, at least it was something that you became accustomed to needing to continuously deal with throughout your life. Whereas what I kind of notice in the work that I do, and I think something that kind of emerges or has emerged in the culture of the LDS Church, is that we have all of the answers. It's all kind of figured out and it's simple. And then when we bump into the inevitability of it not being simple, because it isn't, people don't tend to have the ability, or even they feel in some ways very ill-equipped to manage the wrestle. And so oftentimes it becomes a very sort of black and white kind of thing. And I think that's tricky, because if church belief is black and white, right, wrong, very sort of simplistic, then as soon as the complexity enters in, we apply that same standard and cut and run, and we leave. Yeah. Because we don't actually have a normalized way of experiencing complexity that means, no, this isn't necessarily as painful as it is. I frequently say this in my groups and in my therapy work. You're on schedule. You're learning, you're wrestling, you're going through something incredibly growth oriented. If you can sort of wrap yourself around that and recognize that you have what it takes to do this challenging work. Maybe you don't necessarily realize that quite yet, but I'm along for the ride with you, and we're going to help you recognize that this is within you because you have the DNA of God coursing through you. You are incredibly powerful, and you can in fact do this. You don't need black and white to be okay.
Yeah.
And so I think that maybe talk to me about what that brings up in you.
Well, it's interesting. I was just recently having a conversation with my husband and I were sitting with another couple, and they are have not been involved in church activity in a long time, like many years, but they wanted to discuss that aspect. It's still difficult for them because there are things that they value, but an interesting thing that comes up a lot is they like the phrase that President Hinckley gave that one time when he says either it's all true or it's this big fraud, which is really interesting to me because President Hinckley really brought a lot of nuance frequently in his leadership, and I appreciate a lot of things during the time when he was president that were more nuanced or encouraged more nuance, even though there were plenty of things where it's just like, seriously?
Right.
What?
Yeah.
And like all of us, I mean, yeah, but it was a process. But what is it that people turn to all the time when they're frustrated or angry or trying to wield a weapon to somehow say, see, it's all simple, or see, it's all wrong? They use that phrase. They go to that phrase because we as humans love black and white.
Yeah.
It's the junk food diet of a human experience.
Right.
So we think, oh, that's what we want. Yeah. It's just really cool. It's Twinkies. And we go to the black and white excuse or reason or guilt trip. We go to the black and white thinking because it is really cool. And in the hero's journey, and I'm sure we're going to get to this, our very central story of our ritual, Adam and Eve in the garden, that's it. They're in the garden. It's black and white. Here's who you blame. Here's what you do. Here's the list of, right, you do this, and it's really simple. The state of no wisdom is black and white thinking.
Amen. I love that so much. And you just teed us off beautifully to talk about this idea that the more spiritually healthy we become, the more we recognize that complexity is in fact the name of the game. And yes, in earlier stages, I think there is something very compelling and even very normative. And it's like, okay, for us to want the simplicity when we're young. Children need black and white because that's all their little cognitive brains, that's all their brains can handle. And yet we are here to become grown-ups. We are here to become adults of God, as well as children of God in other special ways. But really, ultimately, we're here to grow wise. We're here to become more like them. And so the way that I kind of see the easiest way to grieve the simplicity and move into and eventually embrace the complexity is to recognize that it is a thing, that there is some way that we can map the messiness of the experience. And many people move well into adulthood before they even recognize that they're on a journey. And there's a lot of disorientation and stress and shock sometimes. And oftentimes in our faith tradition, it comes from something that emerges that doesn't sort of fit into the prescribed plan of what is supposed to happen, as long as we're faithful and sort of filling, checking the proverbial boxes. And so what I try to help people understand, and what I think you are just really beautifully gifted at walking us through, just even from our few conversations before today, is that this journey, in fact, is why we're here. And if we understand the nature of the journey, we can make better sense of it, and we can work our way through it and become more whole along the way, which is, of course, is the essence of the entire idea.
Yeah.
Okay, so Joseph Campbell, I've mentioned this in other podcasts before. He is a scholar and a theologian, and he talks a lot. He's basically systematized this idea of the hero's journey, and he has done a great deal of research in helping us understand that we can see this process everywhere. It's everywhere. And I don't know if you want to jump in and share anything that comes up for you as far as where you've noticed it yourself, Jody. And so let me know if you want to jump in. But in the process, let me just walk you guys through. What he does is he talks us through. There are 12 steps to what he has discovered to be, through his research, the hero's journey that we go through, that is part of life. Okay, before I do that, Jody, anything you want to add about this?
Well, I think it's hard for a lot of people to embrace the power of this, because as a society, and I'm talking Western society, what used to be an acceptable form of moving through stages of life through ritual, but also learning about the power of ritual, is no longer happening.
It's disappearing.
So my parents grew up kind of in a society, and not just the church, but the church was part of it, understanding that there was a purpose to symbolic ritual, and that it was symbolic. And so preparing for the temple and receiving your endowments and going through that theatrical experience of the hero's journey. And this is one reason that I think it is a travesty and a tragedy that the live session is no longer available for members of the church, because the power of the symbolic journey, hero's journey, that takes place in symbolic journey is more powerful when there is more personal, physical involvement in it. You move from room to room. You ascend up higher through the building. The building was designed to experience a theatrical experience of the symbolism of a hero's ascension journey.
Wow.
You're starting out, and you move, you progress up.
Wow. So you're describing that we have, over the years, both culturally at large and inside of the institution itself, lost in some ways the powerful meaning behind and importance of ritual and symbology.
That's part of it. And I would frame it more around the preparation, the understanding.
Like, why does it matter? Like, works. So what?
Yeah. And unfortunately, with the loss of the real preparation of the value of symbolic ritual and vicarious action, we have kind of slipped into that very human nature thing of making it literal, of thinking that it has to have an inherent single truth to it. And unfortunately, a lot of times that truth that we imbue with it is whoever happens to have a powerful voice at the time that we might experience it.
Wow.
So for instance, someone who goes and receives their endowment in the temple, there might be someone in the family or a church leader, or it may be something that someone told them to read, and it says very powerfully what this means, what the truth is. But what they can only say, because in symbolic ritual, the only truth you can find is the truth that speaks to you at that moment.
Yes.
That's what it's meant for. There is not meant to be an inherent, always the same truth about symbolic ritual. The power of it is through the experience, you gain insight into where you're at in the moment.
So you're describing, Jody. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and what it means in the moment for your life. Sometimes that is uncomfortable, and sometimes it's revealing. It's meant to take you to a place of insight for only yourself in ways that only you can see. And it's deeply powerful that way. But if you're going in there thinking, I have to feel this way about it, if I don't feel this way about it, something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
And when people get literal or have pressure or convey pressure to feel a specific way about symbolic ritual, which is not meant for that, it's trauma waiting to happen.
Wow. Why?
Because people will go in, and in a symbolic ritual, you're basically in, like I said, a spiritual theater that that symbolizes the hero's journey, this process of going from a state of innocence and not having to think about wisdom or not dealing with woundedness to a huge to being drawn forward into wisdom and a paradigm shift, which is always deeply confronting. It's a difficult thing. It's like ripping you apart. It's a type of a death.
Yeah.
And moving from one stage of existence to another, but in that opening up to wisdom and complexity. Well, this happens over and over and over in life. To assign a specific language and a specific meaning and a specific truth to it shuts down your ability to see how it relates to your life. And what happens is there's what's wrong with me instead of what is happening with me.
So you're describing, I think, and once again, this is what I love about listening to you, is I'm learning so much about why some people really tend to struggle, not just with temple ritual, but also in general, which is this idea that if I have to have a set of ideas handed to me, that then I'm also assigned to have a certain emotional experience embodied within me, and that thing does not happen, then I internalize a lot of shame. And what you're describing here is that the entire model is wrong when we do it that way, because spiritual growth, in general, I think it's specific in these places where symbology is really heavy. But in general, I think our form of worship is only worship if it's internalized as something that is bringing us closer to the divine. Mm-hmm. And so if and when that happens, we know it because we feel it. And it's best it's best that we recognize that in the spiritual realm, we cannot be there's no mandates about what is and isn't spiritual, what is and isn't holy. And when we see something that's presented to us and we're given the liberty to make it our own and to find deep meaning embedded in whatever it is that's going on in the ritual, then we will become closer to God, and then we take ownership of it. Whereas if we don't do that and something is sort of jammed down our throats a little bit, that's where the trauma begins, because it certainly doesn't resonate. Or sometimes people go through the motions for years and years and years, feeling nothing, and then in the end, abandoning it and feeling betrayed by God, when God has been sort of independent of the entire unfolding of that process.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really hard for people to realize, look, that isn't actually God in the endowment. That really isn't. And yes, even though there is that building, that structure, the symbolic ritual and everything, it is set apart, as in it is not a part of normal life. And that is an important part of ritual. There is a place that is distinct. And if you can learn that is a place to go and honor what it is for, but not approach it like, I have to feel this way. This has to be the best place in the world. There should be no other place that I want to be other than this. Because that's the message people get.
And it's harmful.
No, it has a purpose.
Yeah.
And if we can go there honoring the purpose and prepare for that, it becomes a really amazing place. Like, there are young people that come to me and they go, I'm not sure I can, I really want to go on a mission. I'm not sure I can handle the temple, because I'm hearing so many different things. I'm hearing that I'm supposed to feel this. I don't see how I can feel that. And so they'll come to me and I'll just give them some background about symbolic ritual.
Yeah. And
I don't say, oh, here's what it means, here's what happened, or anything. I just go, have you ever been to Comic-Con? And if they have, then it's like, okay, so there's a distinct place, it has a purpose, people are going, there's special clothes, there's a recognition of what certain things mean, and it's nearly everything is centered. And the draw of something like comics or Comic-Con is that it's about heroes' journeys. But a lot of times, especially young people, they probably haven't been to Comic-Con. They might know about it. So
Yeah.
I go, how many times have you seen Star Wars?
Yeah.
How many times have you seen Lord of the Rings? Have you read the books? Have you read Chronicles of Narnia? And so we talk about what's the draw there? What brings you back to seeing this? And do you ever think, oh gosh, I'm going to put that outfit on that Ray is wearing, and I'm going to go through, I'm the one battling. I'm the one who is confused. I'm the one who's seeking. I'm the one who's doing hard things. I'm the one who is all of a sudden, I find out something that I could not imagine. And it confronts me. So really bringing them back into, even though it's pop culture, it's still really important to get.
It's the same principle.
It's the same principle. And this is
Yeah.
why some of the greatest aspects of our pop culture are framed around the hero's journey.
Yes.
And the same types of things, when you see yourself in it, and you might see yourself as the stormtrooper, you might see yourself as Darth Vader, you might, at different times you're going to see yourself in different places.
Yes. I think what you're
And
just, let me, if I may, let me just jump in and kind of, I want to just contextualize for our listeners why this matters. Why is this conversation about the temple relevant to the hero's journey? And I think you're making a couple of very distinctive, but very good points on two different levels. Level number one is that you're helping me, and I think there are others out there who have a complex relationship with the temple. It's really kind of set forward as something that is a very, very big deal and very almost like mandatory for us to have a certain relationship with it and have a certain experience therein. And what you're basically saying is that in and of itself is a setup for problems. And that the temple, once again, like in my podcast, I talk frequently about, there are so many offerings. There are so many wonderful opportunities for people in this church, and quite frankly, in every church, to help people become made over in the image of God, to come closer to them. And the temple for us is one of those things. And if we are allowed our moral, psychological, spiritual agency and want to participate in this thing, we can do so in a way that is enlightening and enriching to ourselves on our own terms, based on what we feel, what we experience, and if we're allowed the liberty and the agency to go in there and create something that feels like worship to us, where we are able to, once again, back to your childhood, if we're able to be open, questioning, dialoguing, challenging, curious, and allow that to be our worship experience, and the temple might become more meaningful for people because it is not proscribed about what we do, why we do it, how we're supposed to feel, what we're supposed to even believe, and what it even means. It can be very different. Okay, and point number two that I want to make to circle us back to the hero's journey itself is that the story of the garden in and of itself is a beautiful, beautiful myth around the hero's journey itself. And let me just go through these 12 stages, because if you want, you can think about how this applies to the creation story. And you can also think about, because we're going to get there in a second, we're going to talk about how we are each on a hero's journey. And perhaps we can even contextualize it around how we're each on our own hero's journey as we make sense of our relationship with our faith, with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Okay, so here are the 12 steps of the hero's journey. Number one is we live in the ordinary world. So we're having sort of an ordinary world experience. He doesn't mention it here in the writings that I'm looking at, but I know that one of the very main component of the hero's journey is, most frequently, the individual discussed is somebody of royal birth, but they don't know it. And so they're living this normal, ordinary life. And for whatever reason, they are called to an adventure. And it feels too big. It's too scary. It's not what they're used to. It's not what they were expecting. And early on, they refuse. They don't want to do it. It's too hard. And then next, they meet a mentor, somebody who has gone before them, somebody that gives them a little bit of extra courage and a sense of a deeper purpose in this journey that they're being called towards. And I'm getting a little bit choked up here because I'm actually thinking about myself and how many mentors I have been blessed with. As I'm noticing, as I list these things off, I have experienced each and every one of these points that God has put in my path. First books, and now actual people, amazing people that are teaching me and giving me courage and strength. And so we all need each other as we especially as we walk these early path, this early part of our hero's journey, because we do not feel equipped. We don't have what we think we need, and we're probably right. We need these mentors. Okay, let me put myself together and move on. Okay, so next, after we have the meeting of the mentor, we cross a threshold. We actually take our first steps into this actual journey itself. At this point in time, this is kind of the long middle, the messy middle of the hero's journey, is we go through a multitude of tests. And we find in those tests, we find our allies, but we also are, it's mandatory that we have to confront our enemies, those that would have us fail, those that do not like, for a variety of reasons, they don't want us to be on this journey. Next, we approach what is called the inmost cave, something that is deep, something that is frightening, something that also probably has within it a lot of wisdom, or some things that we are going to learn from and come to deeper understandings by reaching this inmost cave. And then there is the ordeal. And I think there's probably, here it says there's an ordeal. My thoughts on this, and maybe you can check me on this, Jody, but I'm of the inclination there's probably a lot of ordeals, but we have sort of these deep moments of suffering.
Well,
Yes.
and there are a lot of journeys.
This is sort of a cyclical process, like
Right.
I've mentioned in another podcast right here next to this one, is this idea that this is something that it kind of cycles over and over and over again. And then after this ordeal, we find that we were in fact big enough, strong enough, and resourced enough. And we find the reward where we seize the sword, or we find more power than we thought we were capable of having. At which point in time it is given to us that we can return back to our home, where we find a resurrection or a new kind of beginning. And we are our old selves, but we're actually not our old selves. Mm-hmm. We look the same, but we have become different. We have emerged as something that is wiser, stronger, and able to look around and help other people. And then finally, we return with the elixir. And what that means, I actually looked that up because I kind of knew what it meant, but I wanted to be extra sure that I knew what it meant in the context of Joseph Campbell's work. The elixir is a phenomenon that Joseph Campbell refers to. It's usually symbolically a type of medicine or potion, and it's anything that can bring healing, whether physical or symbolic, to the hero's community. Okay, I'm going to take a break, and I want to hear what you have to say, Jody, as I have been talking through the hero's journey. What has this brought up in you? These steps and stages, just for your own self, your own personal life, or what you're experiencing right this second.
So one thing that I really, so many things, especially, it is moving to think of the mentors we have, the messengers that come to us, and that's a really important part of our own ritual. This assurance, this promise, we will visit you.
Yeah.
We will, you're not alone.
Yeah.
And, because there have been a lot of funerals lately.
Yeah.
And it's definitely, like last week, I went to 3 funerals, and
oh wow,
and they were 3 generations apart. So this tragedy of someone younger with young children dying, someone my own age dying unexpectedly, but also another mentor of mine in her 90s who passed, and obviously people who really have impacted me from a very young age.
Yes.
It's their time, and it's hard to see that loss, but to be overwhelmed at how, the difference it makes in my life to know the people I've been blessed to know. Incredible things have happened in this world because of these people, and there are times when I just go, I got to sit with them. They taught me, they encouraged me, they healed me. And that elixir is a really great expression for this experience of feeling bound up, feeling sat with, feeling healed because of the actions, the words, and the presence of people in my life over and over. So that's a really important part. But I appreciate that my grandfather was in the temple presidency when during the last major remodel, when the annex was built in the early 60s, and they did that building that you would enter through, and the locker rooms and everything.
Is this the Salt Lake Temple you're referencing?
Salt Lake Temple. And I remember just as a child, he would take me to the construction site, and he would talk about the temple, and he would talk about what goes on there. And he'd also, Grandpa worked with the logistics of it in many different aspects. So as temple president, there were a lot of different logistics that he was either working with or aware of. And he would speak very frankly about high-level leaders in the church and his frustration because, some would be put in charge of something they didn't understand anything about it. And he'd have to deal with the things. And my grandpa was, not perfect in any way, but he didn't hesitate to express frustration when things weren't going well. So at an early age, I really saw the temple was a building, first and foremost, and that people who ran the church and were all around me were humans.
Wow.
And that stayed with me.
What a gift. What a gift. I don't think very many people have that perspective.
Yeah.
That's unique and special.
And there's there are plenty of people in the institution that have always recognized that and are not trying to promote something, yes, it's a building, and it's a building that is set apart and basically ordained to be for a specific purpose. Like we are set apart and ordained for a specific purpose. But what's our temptation? It's to somehow remove the struggle with that, or remove any challenge to that, and just imbue it with, so that means anything that this person says comes from God. Don't question it and don't make things harder. Yeah. But what happens is things are definitely harder.
Yeah, things get harder.
They may seem easier, but they're harder. But to see the temple, it's a building first. It's set apart for a purpose. And the purpose is that we can practice this hero's journey over and over and see where we're at.
I love that.
And to see every part. And even then, even when people recognize there's a symbolism to it and it's figurative and the power in it is to go through this journey and see what shows up for you, they get they compartmentalize it. It's like, oh, okay, it's figurative, and since I'm a woman, Eve's figurative, but everything else is literal. Or Adam's figurative and everything else is literal. No, the power in it is absolutely every single part of it is you.
Yeah.
You're Adam, you're Eve, you're the messengers, you're Satan, you're Elohim, you're Jehovah, you're the garden, you're the world. And when we step so completely into that kind of an experience of figurative, the covenants are figurative of, as part of the journey, becoming in partnership with people. And what happens when you're in partnership? The whole premise of learning something or being a person who can somehow progress and prove that you can progress, that there are ways that you prove it. The insight that comes is that there is no guard, there is no barrier that is bigger than you, yourself.
Wow.
There is no physical barrier out there that you somehow have to prove yourself to.
Yeah.
That is more obstructive than your own self.
Wow. So it's
So
giving
going
us,
through the practices of somehow proving yourself or knowing the right word or knowing the right action that will enable you to progress really has to do with you looking at what is my barrier to being unified with the person I say I want to be.
wow.
What practice do I need to take on to truly be the person that Christ asked me to be?
So you're describing
And I remember
self-confrontation, I think was that, is it right?
very much
So
this is mindfulness work.
mm-hmm.
Any symbolic ritual is meant to be shadow work. It's meant to be mindfulness work.
Yes.
But as human beings, we want to point the finger to someone else because we are in the garden again and again and again. So even as we gain insight, even as we have this moment of breathless, oh my gosh, if I take this, nothing will ever be the same. And I don't know what it's going to look like, but something draws me to wisdom. So I'm going to take this. And then I'm going to deal with the wounds, and I'm going to turn to my mentors, and I'm going to, build relationships with those that help me and create this bond of I am here for you and you're here for me, even when it's hard, and then we'll fail and then we'll try again. So that happens in an area, but then there's another area where you're still in the garden, which is why symbolic ritual is meant to be, you go back and you go back and you go back.
Yes.
It's why people keep going and watching Star Wars and they keep reading Lord of the Rings. There is something that they're still stuck around, and there was this experience of going through an epiphany, and they'll wrestle with that again. And what I really appreciate is the power of the practice helping me make everything symbolic. Everything is vicarious. So that when, as I really get the practice of seeing this, what if this were a ritual? What if this going to church is a place where I can learn something more about myself?
Yeah.
And our most important and regular ritual of taking the sacrament. No one is going to sit there and go, this is actually the flesh of Jesus Christ that I am eating. It is symbolic.
Yes.
And yet the power of the symbolism of taking something that actually goes into you and physically feeds your cells.
Yes.
How is it that you are going to turn to the example of Christ and allow it to nourish you in your journey so that you can keep moving forward? How is it that you're going to drink this water that is not actually blood, but it represents this life force of the person that we are promising to follow? And it literally goes into your body, but it symbolically is that living water that Christ brought. So what is it that I'm taking into myself that is that living water? This is not a conference talk. This is not making sure I agree with anyone.
Right.
This is a powerful experience of going directly to what did Christ teach me? How is it bringing me sustenance? What is challenging about that? How do I look for reasons not to? What is holding me back? And so going through symbolic ritual for me has made more things that are symbolic become a part of a journey and a part of a confronting, okay, what's there for me? What's showing up? Even going to movies, the most inspiring and powerful movies somehow depict this, this journey, this ritual. And theater is really from an early age. I'm really grateful. My parents would take us to Shakespeare and great plays and other things. These are all heroes' journeys.
Yes.
And nowhere am I sitting in the audience going, well, that's literal. That's actually this person. And there would be discussions of recognizing, oh, why is this really impactful? Why does that stay with you? What is it that was happening on that stage what do you see from that? What's confronting for you? And that, dad would lead student groups to London, and those always involve seeing plays and discussions about the plays after, carrying the symbolic ritual forward, so that even if someone is not finding value, and again, I encourage people not to look for truth in a symbolic ritual. I encourage them to look for value. What are you seeing? What is happening for you?
Yeah.
And so finding value in a theatrical experience. And it's perfectly fine to just go to something because you want to laugh. But the experience of seeing everything as a vicarious experience then carries over into, I think, the central and ultimate and most important lesson Christ taught. And it was his last parable, the parable of the sheep and the goats, which is, if you've done it to anyone, you've done it to me.
Yeah.
If you haven't done it to anyone, you've done it to me. Love one another really is about loving God.
Yes.
So everything we do is a vicarious experience of our relationship with God.
Yes. And you're, thank you so much, by the way. That's very, very lovely. So many things I could kind of circle back on, but I guess I'll just sort of land on this, Jody, is you're helping us expand worship. You're helping us recognize that we can find worship at the movie theater. We can find worship at a Shakespearean festival. We can find worship in the temple. We can find worship wherever we become active agents in our own growth process, where we look at everything as symbolic, and as a way to see how we're doing and check in with ourselves and see if we are in fact learning how to become more like our Savior Jesus Christ and our heavenly parents in enacting love. And I think that's really, really lovely. And I think one thing I want to do, if I may, as we sort of close up our time, is I'd love to hear you talk for a minute about those folks, those of us who are struggling in our relationship with the church, who are feeling disoriented, who are not they're moving into and already or perhaps somewhere in the hero's journey, but they're not feeling competent in, or even like they should or want to stay. And I'm always kind of open to, like, maybe nobody has to stay, right? Everybody can do whatever they feel is right for them, and that's absolutely I think the healthiest paradigm to have. And yet I think some people do want to maintain at least a healthy relationship with the church because it is so deeply ingrained in who they are, or because they have family and loved ones and heritage. How can you incorporate, or what could you say to those folks, as far as what your understanding is of the hero's journey and what they're suffering from?
Yeah. It's hard for us to let go of what we expected things to be. And so seeing that a shifting perspective or experience or understanding of what the church is, as a part of the journey, I think is an important step. There's so many resources that have really helped me over the years, but and like I said, we could go on. I think one of the biggest barriers we hit when things happen and it's not what we expected, and in the very human experience we have, we think, well, I did this and this and this, I'm supposed to be getting this and this and this.
Yeah.
The black and white transactional, which means it's you do certain things, you get a guaranteed result.
Yeah.
And again, the junk food of life. We love that. We want to know just tell me how many times to do this and then I'll get what I want. And this is an important part of the journey, to have those experiences over and over where that is not how it happens.
Right.
Parents know this. I think one of the greatest challenges to a parent is over and over and over seeing their child's life that you envisioned the moment they were born is different from what you expected. And you can either push back and try to cram them into that expectation. And with so much of my work in suicide prevention, I'm constantly telling parents, if you are trying to cram your child into your expectation, you are cutting off their air supply.
Wow.
They will not be able to breathe.
Yes.
And they will either stop breathing in the world or they'll stop breathing around you.
Beautifully said.
And it's a similar type of thing. The things that you find value, which have been important in your life, inevitably you're going to come up against when it is not what you expected. And you might feel betrayal. You might feel, oh, now I'm aware, all these different things. This is a part of the journey. Let go of thinking there's something wrong with that. Any type of progress, any type of moving forward will involve some aspect of this in every part of your life.
Yes.
I think it's really interesting. I know people who dealt with kind of all of a sudden a shift, a crisis, a journey in their faith, but that was one thing. They're having a much harder time with their political journey.
Yeah, it's all the same. I mean, it's like
it's all the same. This is not
circular.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is not a Mormon problem. This is not a church. This is a human
Yes.
journey. And so I encourage people to take on the practice of owning it.
Mm.
And before we started recording, you were talking about integrity, and I hear this a lot. It's just people will say, well, in order for me to keep my integrity, then I need to do this. And what they're doing is actually blaming someone else. And because of someone else's actions, for them to keep their integrity, they've got to burn it all down.
Mm.
I'm not saying this is everybody who says, my integrity calls me to do this. To really look at owning your own journey, ultimately getting that regardless of, you mentioned the word agent, and this is right there in our scriptures. This is a really amazing verse. Are you going to be objects that are acted upon or agents that act?
Wow.
And the power of getting that everything that happens in our life, we might not be able to control. When we definitely can't control what other people do, but we always have a say in how we are going to be in the midst of it. And taking on that practice and owning it and getting, here is what has been valuable to me about my church experience, or what I've learned, or what I am learning. Many people never, don't get me started on the church education system. I grew up learning a lot of complexity about the questions that Joseph, and I credit Emma a lot with this, a lot of the conversations that led to a different understanding of our journey in the wilderness, being coexistent with God, not birthed from our Heavenly Mother, but really coexistent.
Yes.
And our Heavenly Parents, inspired us towards wisdom. Our hero's journey began long moment
ago.
whatever, but for eternity we've been on this journey, and we were born into wisdom.
Yes.
But we chose it. It can't happen or work unless we choose it. Yes. That's inspiring to me. That's unlike anything anywhere else.
Yeah.
So getting that there are these really unique and amazing aspects of this faith journey that is, mine is housed, the practice is housed in this Restoration Church, and seeing value of it, but also seeing my own part, instead of always saying, well, the church, that's a convenient way of not owning your journey.
Mm-hmm.
That somehow your actions are determined by a non-entity. Yeah. Acknowledge when the actions, the words of someone or some group might have caused you to see things you hadn't seen before. But what are you going to do with it? And is that something that draws you to be closer or more like the person you say you want to be? Are you letting go of the transactional, moving towards the transformational? Can you really do that without being confronted in your practice? And if it's too painful to do that practice within the structure of this church community, where will you practice it? And where will you have the people that call you to be that? Where will you have those witnesses that are there saying, yes, we witness together to be like Christ? I will stand for you for that.
Wow.
And you can call me out when I'm not. There is a structure and a practice to that. And it's very complex. So my encouragement is, there's this amazing TED Talk by a rabbi. She's a lesbian rabbi, and she talks about the master story. And I really encourage everyone everywhere to look at that, because we have the power of recreating and shaping the communities where we participate. Part of it is recognizing, okay, no, I can't really determine or really get inside the reasoning behind the corporate leadership. And here's my neighbor who is dealing with cancer. And I only know that because I'm sitting next to them in my community. Here's my neighbor that I disagree with, but I learned to love and find out that agreement and disagreement makes absolutely no difference. Christ didn't say, love one another as long as you agree. So while it's understandable to say, I can't, I found this out and I can't let myself be around this structure that I am seeing harm. I get that. And there's nothing wrong with that. And now what are you going to do with your life? And looking for ways to put yourself in community with people who will be your mentors, who will walk with you through that, out of the garden and into the lone and dreary world, who will call you to be the person you say you want to be. And looking for and honoring the parts that have helped shape you. And it may mean that you've got your practice within a building and you have an online Sunday school that has infinitely more vibrant discussion than you have in your ward. And you have a community where you're feeling empowered to share your voice, where you don't feel empowered to share it here, but you do have that experience of a sacrament ritual, or the experience of being able to offer compassionate service to each other, or the experience of, well, I mentioned this poem, and I don't have it in front of me at the moment, but it's a poem called Voting as a Fire Extinguisher, where it talks about, you see the house burning down and you wonder if it's worth saving because it was built on blood and weapons and should you just let it burn down? And then, do you want to be the cynic? Do you want to be involved in saving the structure? Or do you just want to turn away? And then you realize there are children in the fire. And it's a powerful metaphor. Every community, and especially faith communities, Mormons are really good at birthing LGBTQ kids. They're really good at that.
That's right.
And being a part of the community that shifts the conversation. Because I promise unto you, no shift in the conversation in the church has ever come from the top.
Right. Amen. It's from us.
It is inspired by members.
Yeah.
And always has been.
Yes.
Multiple ways. We want to think the black and white thinking, oh, good. God hands an agenda list to the top and that's where it comes. It cannot happen that way because it wasn't built that way. Nothing that lasts was and will be.
Wow.
And if there is any future to any organization, yeah, you can say it hurt me. I'm gonna make sure it burn. I'm not only gonna let it burn down. I'm gonna make sure it burns down.
Hmm.
Won't work any more than it will work for top leadership to insist that nothing is ever going to change. Things are always changing, always have been changing.
Yes.
So if you want to have an impact on the world, you get that every structure that lasts is shifting, and because we care about each other and we are a part of making it shift. And you
Beautiful.
might not find help by remaining in this structure, but at some point you're going to find another structure, and it will challenge you to be the one that helps shift the conversation. Or you just become a person who keeps leaving each time something happens. And you never mature. You never enter wisdom. You keep pointing the finger at the serpent or at Eve or at Adam or whatever. And you never mature into the person you say you want to be.
Wow.
I know that's kind of a tangle. I don't know if I followed a thread there, but
I think you did a beautiful job. I will summarize a few things that I picked up on from my last question, Jody. What I picked up on, what I learned. Number one is that we are going to be on a journey whether we like it or not. Meaning that it can be here, it can be there, it can be elsewhere, but we're going to be invited on a journey. And if it becomes too challenging in that, I was actually looking back at the notes here from Joseph Campbell. If we move into that refusal process too many times, then we end up just going somewhere else where we're going to be invited on yet another journey. Because in my mind, the gods that we worship are incredibly committed to our growth. And so it's going to chase us everywhere we go. And so we can commit to this growth experience here, where we have family and loved ones and friends and heritage. And that's fine for some of us. And it works, especially when we have contextualized that we're on track. A big mistake has not, in fact, been made. We are actually on track in our own divine growth and our growth process. Or for some of us, and I guess this is where I kind of think about my own experience in trauma work. For some people, they do not feel like this is the place where they can step into their power and do that growth work. And that I dignify. That is absolutely a viable option for some people, because sometimes the wounds have been so great and they have been wounded so much. And so we need to love and honor that, and also help them recognize that wherever they go, if they're lucky, they will in fact get the gift of a journey somewhere else. And that we want to love and respect everyone's choices as far as where they're going to do their own spiritual maturation work and psychological and relational growth experiences, because that is in fact why we're here. We're all on our own hero's journeys. We can think of relationship, we can think of education, we can think of professional practices, we can think of how we move about in the world. And when we hit those stumbling blocks where we feel so disoriented, like everything's falling apart, the best thing I've ever learned how to do for myself is recognize that no, everything is not in fact falling apart. I am being called to my next thing. And having that kind of frame of reference is incredibly empowering to start looking around. Where are my mentors? What are the things that I'm trying to do? Oh, here's a test. There's an ally. Over there's an enemy. Here I am in my ordeal. And we're working my way through that and recognizing that in some cases, because it's a cyclical thing, we find that we work our way through and that we are not as we were. And we bring some degree of healing, only to realize that a little bit of time passes by and off we go again on a new journey. And that we have metaphorical experiences throughout our lives, these places where we pause, whether it be in the movie theater or in the temple, wherever we go, we can find remembrances that life is about journey, and that we can watch others. We can be a part of the symbolic nature of learning that life is a journey by seeing it enacted over and over and over again through the lives of other people, through other cultures, through other traditions, through other times. It's this one big, beautiful experience that God has enabled us to have the eyes to see and recognize that we are, in fact, a part of this thing. And that in and of itself is an incredibly sacred kind of experience if we can see it for what it is. Okay. Any final thoughts, Jody, as we wrap up today? What has this been like for you, our conversation?
I've loved it. I think this is great. I've had the opportunity to travel to different parts of the world, and one of the things that's really powerful, not only the theatrical experiences, because I love London, greatest theater in the world.
Yeah.
No, not the expensive stuff, but the real theater, National Theater and Shakespeare Theater. But how prevalent this type of journey ritual is in every culture that I've seen. Last month I was in Nepal and Bhutan.
Oh, wow.
And the ritual practice, the physical practice was just it was an amazing experience. It was deeply spiritual, and someone said, "Why would you go there?" And I said, "Every experience I have with other cultures makes me a better Mormon."
Yeah.
Because I recognize things that are drawing people towards the God experience and the practices and the rituals, but also inevitably in the midst of it, when I get a chance to talk with people, they're saying all of this points me to love my neighbor.
And that's all that really it comes down to.
Yeah, all of this helps me see where I'm not, where I can practice it, what confronts me. And ultimately, this is the most important thing. And so over and over in South America, in different parts of Europe, in even Australia and Nepal and Bhutan and Jerusalem. Oh, whoa, Jerusalem and Jordan. Going with a group where there were Jews and Catholics and different Protestants in the group, and how much we talked about this and the power of confronting dissonance in the place of ritual. I feel over and over I've been on sacred ground as people have shared their journeys and asked me about mine.
Wow.
And the conversation is the same. When you get right down to it, very individual for the person, but over and over, people are just thinking, this happened. It's not what I expected. What do I do with this? And here's what's sublime, and here's what's profane, and seeing this place that people go back to ritual to take themselves to a place of direct connection to what's going on inside and how it leads them to divinity. Oh. It's really been a sacred part of my journey, is how others share this. Because I think amazing. This wonderful depiction in the Book of Mormon, how Christ came and he invites people one by one to come and become one with him by touching his wounds, which really, I think this is why we share this journey, is we are here to sit with each other in our wounds. And in that companionship and love and connection, they heal. So Christ invites people to come and touch his wounds and become one with him, one by one. God knows us one by one. We learn to be godlike as we go to each other one by one and listen and sit with each other one by one. And it is through our relationships in community, the confronting, the betrayals, the deep, harsh ripping apart that we do to each other, and in the coming through that and learning love in the midst of that, not because it's easy, but because it transforms over and over, is what enables us to recognize that we are standing in front of God and we are touching and becoming one with in the wounds. There is no one no one who can go through this without the wounds. Stop making the wounds wrong, and stop making sitting with each other in that place wrong. There is not a nice, happy, shiny way to do this. But as humans, we keep wanting to make it happy and shiny and easy to understand. No, there's just no way to explain it. You just experience it and you endure it and you go through it.
Wow. Wow. I think we'll just, why don't we end there? That's beautiful. Beautiful way to end our conversation together, Jody. What a sacred time this has been for me to listen to you, to learn, to think, to process. It just reminds me of how big this is. Life, growth, pain, suffering, healing, communion, community. It reminds me of something that Rob Bell says. He's one of my favorite authors. He says, you know, it comes down to the fact that maybe this was all rigged for our growth. It's all been rigged. So, all right.
I think too often we're trying to cram ourselves into benefiting the temple or benefiting the church. The church is here for us. Mm-hmm. To aid us on our journey, to help us practice, to create a structure. The temple is here for us. We're not here to somehow satisfy the temple.
Right.
We are here to benefit from what the ritual can offer us.
A total shift in paradigm in so many different ways is, I think, what my growth journey has taught me. So many things remain true, but in a completely different way that I thought from the gate. So thank you so much for being with me today, Jody. And I'm going to link in the show notes. Okay, you mentioned a poem. You mentioned a TED Talk. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I will also link the 12 steps of the hero's journey as well. So we'll get that down. We'll get that for you all so that you can go and see those. As per usual, I invite everybody to please take this content if it has touched you, if it has helped you see your life and your experience and even your suffering and your growth from a different perspective. Please take this information and share it with people around you. And also, if you have not done so, please subscribe to this podcast. And if you're somebody who wants to be in an actual community of people growing and sharing and trying to make sense of their own faith journey, their hero's journey, please feel free to contact me, because I am running several groups where I facilitate these things and I help people. And I actually also take a lot of joy in, I kind of jokingly call it, I'm a good matchmaker. I match people up in these communities where they learn how they find friends all over the country and all over the world with people who are trying themselves to make meaning of their faith experience here in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and around. So if this is something that feels, if you don't want to do this alone, reach me at info@valeriehammaker.com or on Instagram at Latter-day Struggles Podcast. And I will see you all next time. Thank you so much. Thanks, Jody.
Thank you, Val.
Bye-bye.